We're going to get a little warning saying this meeting's being recorded. I'm going to take the waiting room off. So hi, if you're unable to make it today and you're watching on catch up, I know there's a few people who've emailed who can't make it today. So doing these lectures on Zoom is a nice way of being able to you can watch them back if you're feeling a bit stuck, but also if you have been able to not make a certain day, if you're poorly, you can watch these back. It's really useful to have these recorded. So you're more than welcome to keep your cameras off during this session. Then you won't be on the recording. I just tried to log into the register and I still don't have access to the register. So what I'm going to do is screen grab the participants list now. So I can probably figure out how to go in and see who's here, but also I'm just going to do this as a backup. So I'm just screen grabbing who's here. Not your pictures, just your names down the side. And I will do it at the end as well, just to make sure anyone who's joined late is also getting the chance to be marked in. So can everyone hear, can you hear me all right, Emily? You're the only one with camera on. Yeah, brilliant. So hopefully you enjoyed Brittany's talk on Wednesday. It was fab. It was really informative. Me and Brittany have brought in some of our dummy books, and I've brought in some picture books, and you've brought in some sketchbooks as well. Some of the bits Brittany was talking about on Wednesday. So we're going to have those in the studio this afternoon. It will be good to be in about 11:30 today, and you'll see why as we go through. There's going to be a task this afternoon which will use your story that you've written so far, and work on narrative and how to plan narrative. But today I'm going to talk about how picture books work, and I've got a presentation. I'm going to turn my camera off because you do not need to see my face whilst I talk. Let's stop the video. There we go. So I'm going to share screen. Actually, before I start, has anyone got any questions at all from Tuesday or Wednesday? You can use the chat box.
I think I'm personally good. I've still got a few more sketches I need to finish off, but that's about it.
Brilliant, cool. Well, there's time to do. There is time this afternoon to do stuff, and you will be working on this on Monday as well. So there's definitely time to do these things and catch up. If you're a little bit behind, that's fine. Don't worry about it. But if you do have any questions, that is cool. So Danny's got a bit to catch up on as well. That's fine. Someone's asked, what do you they direct message, so I won't say who, but someone's asked, what do you want us to bring in today? You're going to be, this afternoon you're going to be working in your sketchbooks, and I'll show you at the end what you're doing. So hopefully it'll be really clear, but you'll need something to draw with. You'll need your sketchbook, you'll need your story from when did we do it? Tuesday. But I will go through the final task this afternoon, and I'll show you what we're doing this afternoon. Joe said wasn't sure about my narrative, but can I ask you about that later today? Yes, if you're unsure about your narrative or if you need a bit of help, the best time to come in is between 11:30 and lunchtime, so 11:30, 12:30. Because after lunch, me and Brittany are going to show some examples of dummy books to small groups of you. So you can see how to put together a dummy book, how rough they can be, how final they can be. So the best time to come in to chat about narrative is going to be 11:30. And I'll do the same as I did on Tuesday. I'll do a sign up list, and you can see me or Brittany and just chat through about narrative and getting that signed off. So hopefully that's good for a couple of you maybe who are feeling a bit unsure about your narrative or just need a bit more clarification. So hopefully that's helpful. If you do have any more questions as we go through the talk, please do leave them in the chat box, and what I'll do is I'll come to them at the end, unless I feel like it's needed as I'm going through. But good questions this morning. Thank you for those. That's really good, and hopefully that's helped other people who feel unsure as well. I'm going to talk for about an hour, so I hope you're comfortable and have a drink, like a tea or a coffee or a water. But I'm going to talk for an hour about how picture books work. So this is Christian Robinson, who I shared earlier in the week on Tuesday. I shared his work already. I love his work. So yeah, how picture books work, and again, is about Arsenal on the right hand side. Me and Brittany both mentioned her work during our talks, so one to check out if you don't know their work already. So this glossary I made a few years ago. I'm going to go through it quickly with you now, but I've asked John to pop this up on the DLE. I still don't have access to DLE, so I don't know if it's on there already, but the idea is that you can print this off on an A4 piece of paper and fold it up, and you can make a little children's book glossary book. You just have to cut down the dotted line in the middle, and you'll be able to make a little book. So it goes through all the bits you might need to know, terminology you might need to know when you're working on a children's book. And some of this terminology crosses over into comics and animation as well, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But what we're going to be working on today is a flat plan. So it's a picture book is 32 pages, and I've mentioned that already this week. I know when we had the text task earlier in the week, I'd sort of marked out a few pages that you couldn't use. So pages 1 and 32 are the front and back cover, and pages 6 to 29 is where the story goes. But you also have space for things like end papers and title page. And we'll talk about those in a minute. But there's also, if we move along, along the bottom here, rough working dummy books. So again, this is what we're going to show you this afternoon. They can be really messy. You can stick extra pages in, you can rip pages out, you can draw on it directly, and dummy books are used to show the pace of a story. So like I mentioned on Tuesday, the best thing about books is that you can turn those pages and you can cut holes in and have flaps and have things pop out if you want to. But having it physically in a little book means you can read and feel the pace, almost like a film, you know, the way a film goes, the structure of a film, you can feel it in a book. So there's a rough working dummy book, which we're going to show you this afternoon. And there's also a final dummy book, so something you might take to a publisher or an agent. And this is a bit more well presented, it's to scale, it's readable, it's possibly printed. So something like Brittany's, is it your dissertation book you shared on? So the dissertation book Brittany shared on Wednesday, that could be a final dummy book that Brittany could then take to a publisher to say, would you like to publish this? Or it might be something that you then go on to self-publish and print yourself. So a final dummy book is something a bit more working. It'll have final artwork in it. A rough working dummy book wouldn't have final artwork in it. It would be quite scrappy, but would be legible to you. And we're going to show you this afternoon. There's start with story planning. So story planning is, again, kind of what you've been doing as part of task 3. So it's drawing around the text to get to know your characters and expand the world you've created. So those tasks where it was sort of draw your characters with props or talking to someone, that's to do with story planning. And those little elements of story planning can influence your story. So, you know, you might have done a story about I'm just trying to think, a witch who goes into the woods and is bad, but perhaps when you start drawing the witch character and them interacting with stuff, perhaps when they start interacting with nature, you realize actually they're quite a good witch and it could influence your story. So here I've drawn lots of cats, but it could be anything. Thumbnails, again, we're going to use these today, are a small box used to roughly plan the composition of your pages, and these will make up your flat plan. So I'm going to talk about those today. The gutter, we talked about these in a few sign up tutorials that we did on Tuesday, but it's the middle of the double page spread. So almost think about the middle of page, the middle bit of your sketchbook, and don't put anything there. Don't put any text there, don't put any characters there. And that's because when it's printed, that's where the staples or stitching will go and things can disappear into that. So don't put anything important over or into the gutter. Text placement is really important and something you should think about quite early on within your story. So think about where your text will sit right from the start. use lines to represent it in small thumbnails. So for example, you don't need to write the story into these little thumbnails. You can just put lines to represent where the text is going to sit. Just make sure you leave enough space. If it's a long paragraph of text and you just put one line, it's not going to fit. And then image placement, and to quickly plan layouts, you can use X's to represent where an image would sit, and we're going to do that today. And then there's other things like cover, end papers, and title page. I'm going to show you some examples of these in this talk. Cover will normally include your title, your name, the publisher, possibly the blurb goes on the back. There's a spine which you can put things on, so you can add decorative elements to the spine, and then a barcode which will be used for shops. And then end papers, they're the pages that I've made you leave blank so far, but they can be decorative and are sometimes substituted to use as part of the story. So some of you might be really struggling to fit your book into 32 pages. You can use those end papers, and again, we can talk about that over the next few weeks, but most people do enjoy making end papers because they're patterns or extra pictures that you couldn't fit in the book, or a map to show where the characters live. So there's lots you can do with end papers. And then title page is after the end paper. So the end papers are used to attach the cover to the book. And again, I'll show you a diagram of that in a minute, but title pages after end papers, and it replicates almost what's on the cover. So you've got your title, name, if it's a first edition, second edition, you've got publisher info in there, and you can also put a dedication, so you can dedicate it to whoever you'd like. You can put images on the title page. Doesn't have to be the same as what's in the it doesn't have to be the same as what's on the cover, but it can be something else. Dylan, don't worry, I'm recording it so you can catch up with it later. So if you are really struggling with internet, do not worry. And Joe said, how many papers are you recommending we use, or was it just the share method you use for it? What do you mean by papers, Joe? Do you mean pages in the book? And Maisie has said about help with the story. Yeah, come in at 11:30, Maisie, and we can work on that, so do not worry. So creating a picture book is in the same way. Oh, Joe, don't worry, we'll go through that as well, don't worry. You need eight pieces of paper, but I'll show you that in a minute. Creating a picture book is in some ways closely akin to directing a film, with all the elements of pace, suspense, and rhythm that are involved. A successful synthesis of words and pictures needs planning. So this is Martin Salisbury, who works on the Children's Book Illustration MA in Cambridge, and he wrote the book on children's book illustration, so he's very well known within children's book illustration. I just wanted to show you, because I tell people this every year, and but I've never really explained it fully, but everything you're learning within this strand, all these skills can be taken and used in other areas of illustration. So I know some of you are sat there thinking, I really don't want to do children's books. That's okay. But everything you're doing within this, you can use elsewhere. So character design, everything about the character should inform us of their narrative. So thinking about costume, hairstyle, props, and that can be used in animation, storyboarding, character design, comics, printmaking, editorial, game design, children's books, pattern design, it goes on. And I'm not going to go through all of these because I think we'd be here all day, but if you are thinking this probably, children's books isn't for me, please do realize that all of these takeaway from this project is the skills that we're teaching. So pacing, it can be used in all forms of narrative. Storytelling, again, it's all forms of narrative, and you can tell any kind of story you want. It can be a loud story, or it can be quite quiet or informative, non-fiction. It can be funny, silly, lyrical, minimal, or it can have no words at all. But storytelling is used in all forms of narrative. Animation, film, GIF, game design. It can even be used in editorial. How can we tell more from just one image? Suspense, direction, editing. These are all skills you'll learn over the next few weeks within children's markets, but they'll come up again in other areas of the course as well. Colour. A story can have colour to tell narratives. So I've used an example of Jane the Fox and Me, which is Isabel Arsenault, and I've used an example of that on the right. But that book is really led through the story with colour, and it can harmoniously or unharmoniously give a feel to the story. So that might be something you want to think about if you're doing quite a dark, spooky story. What colours are you going to use? If you're doing quite a silly, funny story, are they going to be bright colours, or are you going to if it's a silly story but it's all done in black and white, what kind of feeling does that give? Thumbnails, we're going to work on those today, but you'll use them in all sorts of illustration, and most editors, no matter what area of illustration you're working in, want to see roughs and thumbnails before you move on to final artwork. Ideas generation and developing visual language. Again, you'll go through this as you go through the whole course, but I just want to show that these are things we're doing this week. And yes, you might not want to do children's books, but they're skills you can learn and use elsewhere. So this is, I think, Joe, this might help visualize what your question. So picture books are constructed, I've got all these boxes over my text, I've not planned this very well, there we go. Picture books are constructed from signatures. So pages are laid out and printed together on large sheets, which are then cut in half, giving 4 sides and then half again, so 8 sides. And then they're folded, making a bundle of 16 pages called a signature. So if you fold 8 pages of paper, you'll get 16 pages, which is and then back to back, that's 32, which is a picture book. Many picture books consist of 2 signatures sewn together. So you could have 4 pages and then 4 pages, and then they're sewn together, like is shown in the example. And that's the most common format, and is generally easier to produce. And that's because it fits on one sheet of large paper. And you can see here, that's what the end papers are used for. So you've got the 2 signatures. So that's 4 pieces of paper folded, and then the end papers are then being used to glue to the boards, and then the jacket flap. I'm not going to ask you to make a dummy book or make a book that looks like this, and I'll show you the dummy books that me and Brittany have made. I'm pretty sure I've got all my rough and ready ones, which are just pieces of paper folded in half and stapled. That is perfectly fine within this module. I mean, some of mine aren't even stapled and the pages have fallen out. Brittany was just saying before we started this call, a lot of hers when she was on the course were really small. So you can make these quite tiny. They don't have to be to scale. So yeah, don't worry about that. We will show you stuff this afternoon. This is generally how a picture book is kind of put together, and the sort of process that you would go through working on a picture book. I'm just going to mute a few of you that are unmuted, but just for background noise. But if you do need to ask a question, please do unmute. So this is the process you would go through if you were working on a picture book. This is kind of like, I'll show you in a minute what I mean, but this is kind of like a standard baseline. This is what you might do. So familiarize yourself with the text, which is what you were doing on Tuesday. Character design, which is what you were doing on Tuesday. Working on your story planning and image generation, which again is part of task 3, drawing those characters, doing things. And then start to put these into thumbnails, which is what we're going to do today, and use a flat plan to split the text and plan the story out with visuals, and use your thumbnails to work into flat plans. Again, we're going to do this today. Develop certain pages with thumbnails, and then you repeat the above steps over and over until you get a good sense of flow and rhythm and pace within your story. And if you're working with a publisher, you'll get these signed off at that stage, and you have to get them signed off before you go to final artwork. And then you keep the thumbnails you like in the flat plan and change the ones you're not sure of. I think that should be flipped around there. But and then you start to work towards more finalized roughs. more edits, a final flat plan, final line work, final artwork, cover, end papers and title page. So this process roughly, if you're not working with an author, so I've written my own books when I've worked with publishers, this takes about 2 years. Brittany, how long would you say this process takes if you are working with an author?
It does vary. I've done some that have taken about a year. I've done some that they want done in like 3 months. So there is a bit of variety, but it helps when there's already written text, because then you don't have to write it. And a lot of the publishers I've worked with have already decided where the text will go. So some of the jobs are already done for you. So even though it's a smaller time scale, it's more manageable than if you were doing it all yourself.
Yeah, so there's different variants of when you're working with publishers, but also there's different variants of working with this. So this is also a good way of working. So you could start with character design, and then you could jump down and go and start flat planning, and then you could work on the text, and then you could start working towards finalized roughs, and then you could think, these aren't right, I'm going to go back to the flat plan. There is no right or wrong way of doing this, but when you are working with a publisher, you will get areas signed, like I mentioned before, you'll get areas signed off. So if you're writing the text, you have to write that first, get that signed off. Then you have to do roughs, revisions, edits. Then you get those signed off. Then you do the artwork and you have to get that signed off. And there might be edits even at that artwork stage. And then it goes to print, and then you get paid right at the end. Well, you get paid all the way through at all those signing off stages. But again, contracts change, and we can talk about that if anyone wants to know more about that. But there's no right or wrong way of doing this. You might have found, actually, as we've started working on this project already, you might have found that, oh, actually I've already started thumbnailing, or I've already put together a flat plan, or I've already I found the character design a lot easier, but I'm struggling with the story. That's fine. That's completely normal. It's just finding your own way of working with this. The way I'm giving you is quite set out over the next few weeks. But as you go through the course, you might, and you work on more narratives, whether that's picture books or comics, you might find that actually your process of working is a bit more jumbled up. But there are certain things you still need to do, like revisions. That first idea that you come up with will never be perfect. Well, it could be, but very rarely is it perfect in the first go. So that's what we're going to work on today. So if you have already gone forward and made a flat plan, or you've made roughs and sketches, do please do the task that we're going to set at the end of this, because it's a good way of learning how to work quite quickly. But this is just to show that there is no right or wrong way of doing this. And if you are struggling with the text at the moment, that is completely fine. It's just a different way of working, and it might be that visuals then lend themselves to the text and inspire your text, and it might be that you work the other way around and you need the text written out and finished first. That's completely fine. So story planning, I've mentioned this a couple of times already. I'm just going to move I've got the chat box open, but I've got too many boxes open. Let's just move that over there. Story planning is drawing your characters with props, or in locations, or having conversations, or doing things, or it could be nothing to do with characters. It could be that you're doing a book, like for example, I did a book that I mentioned that I did on trees. So I was drawing lots of trees and different types of trees and people interacting with trees. So it depends what kind of book you're doing, but if you do have a character in your book, story planning can revolve around your character. And so you've already done some of this hopefully on Tuesday, but if not, there's time to do it today or this afternoon. And there's just a quote here from Benjamin Chard, and this is their work here. I found this on Picture Book Maker's blog. And if you are interested in children's picture books and you want to see some more behind the scenes of people's work, that's a great blog to go to, and has lots of well-known children's book illustrators and their processes on there. So do go check that out. Here's some more of their work. So you can see this is a book about a bear in a city, and what Benjamin's done is just drawn all the things that that bear is going to go do or might go do, or the things that Benjamin wants that bear to do. So this bear's going to the theatre to see the ballet. So here's the bear, here's the ballet theatre. Here's lots of props that are being used for the ballet, people in costumes, people carrying in the backing, what are they called? Banners? Theatre stuff. People waiting before they go in and having a drink, people having their a waitress serving people, then you've got people sat in the boxes watching, you've got I'm guessing this is the set here, and then people underneath getting ready, and all the set design and prop design. So not all of this would make it into the book, but he's exploring the world in which this bear lives in. So this bear lives in a big city and is going to the theatre. So you might have those ideas for your story already, especially if you're keeping to the original story that we set. You might be thinking, okay, well, it's Little Red Riding Hood and they're going into the woods. So I can draw Little Red Riding Hood going into the woods. What's there? What animals are in the woods? What weather is it like in the woods? Is it raining? What happens when it's a hot sunny day? Is it cooler in the woods? Is the woods near anything, or is it in the middle of nowhere? Is it near a city? How dark is it? What things could they find on the forest floor? These are all things that you could physically draw, which might help you with your story writing. This is a video. I don't think I will play this one, but I will play one later on. So you do have a video coming up. But if you do want to watch one, this is Sean Tan talking about Rules of Summer, the picture book that he wrote. And this is about where he got the origins and ideas for his story. And you can go back and watch this one if you want to. So this is a quote from Mick Inkpen. You might remember Kipper when you were younger. But another way of getting started is to think about what kind of character is central to your story. You can discover a character either by writing him or her into existence or by drawing them into existence. Kipper started with a drawing, not a storyline. I draw him before I named him. If I get stuck with plot ideas, I find it helpful to switch to drawing. Drawing uses a different part of your brain, so switching between writing and illustrating helps to keep the ideas flowing. And that's from a Guardian article with Mick Inkpen. This is David Hughes's book, Taking a Dog, Walking the Dog. David came to do a talk here a few years ago and spoke about this narrative. So he was working in his sketchbook, which had quite thin paper, and he was working back to back in pages, and drawing his character, which is based on him, I think, taking his dog, which is based on his dog Dexter, for a walk. And this character has all sorts of dark, twisted thoughts whilst they're taking the dog for a walk. And it was an idea for a book, and David took this to the publisher, and they said, well, we want to publish it as is. So he thought of these as rough sketches, or story planning for a book about someone taking a dog for a walk. But actually the story planning is what got him the contract, and they published this. They had problems because the paper was so thin. Working back to back on it meant that some of the other pages came through, so there was a lot of, I think, although it doesn't look like it, I think there was a bit of editing involved to get these looking how they do now. But there's a quote here from him in The Guardian, or no, this is an article written about him in The Guardian. He said he has a strong aversion to roughing out his work. He would rather raise his game and draw in the moment. And he takes his ethos in this book one step further. It's a sketchbook on speed, spidery pencil lines, furious crossing outs, and sprawling handwriting. So, you might actually find that something you work on that's quite rough at this stage does make it through to a final dummy book, and that could be a way of working for you. This is Alexis Deakin, also taught me on the MA in Cambridge, has a lot of picture books out, which you might recognise. This is from, these are rough character sketches, story planning from Croc and Bird. So this is just figuring out how the crocodile and bird interact with each other. But I've got some nice quotes from Alexis here. And also some images to show how a dummy book has gone to final artwork. So the dummy books are at the top and the final book is at the bottom. This is for Bigu. But he says, when I look at an image, I ask myself how I feel about it, what information is it is conveying to me. Then I ask myself what cues in that image might be prompting those feelings, or what specific content is delivering that information. I'm also very interested to know how other people perceive images, to see what we agree and where we differ. Through asking questions such as these, I believe it is possible to better understand how images can be used to tell a story. In any given story, there will be a blend of fact and feeling, and being able to work with these two strands is essential to getting the story across. So this is from an interview with Words and Pictures. I won't read all of this one, but this talks a little bit about Alexis's process. So thinking if something will come and it will be quite vague and most part formless, but there'll be something about it that excites me and moves me in some way. And I'll let that swim around in my head for a while to see how it might become a tale and how it might end. So again, the stage that you're at now, and I know some of you might be struggling with that story writing. I know I mentioned it in my talk on Tuesday, but this stage that you're at now it takes some illustrators years to find that story and get it perfect and kind of, I know I mentioned Beatrice Alamanga putting a story away for 6 years in a drawer. So again, don't be disheartened if this isn't coming to you instantly, because you do, when you are working on a narrative, you do have to let it sit and stew for a bit. I'm working on a new book at the moment and it's just not coming together, but I know it's something, I know it's good, but I need to go away and do some more research and I need to let it kind of simmer for a little bit longer before it comes together, and my publisher completely understands that and told me to go do something else for a couple of weeks and then come back to it. Unfortunately, I can't tell you to do that within this 3 weeks because then the module will be over. But if you are struggling, go back to that initial text, that's the initial text we set, and use it and keep something quite simple, because it could be that the images are what actually leads the text. The text could be really simple, but the images could say so much more. Again, some work from Alexis Deakin. This is Jim's Lion. So here's the dummy book on the left. You can see stuff is stuck in with sellotape, really rough, scrappy drawings. And then this, and they've either stitched it or they've drawn the gutter in. And then this is the final book on the right hand side. So this is it printed. Viv Schwartz, Viv came to teach last year, and Viv is the one who sort of recommended picking something you would have liked to read as a child, and that was the best advice Viv gave me. Viv taught me here when I was studying here 12 years ago, and that's the best bit of advice Viv gave, is to make sure it's something that you would have wanted to read as a child. So do think back to that when you're working. Let me just move some blocks out of the way. So once you've sort of got these sketches of your character doing things, or the environment doing things, or ideas that you think, oh yeah, I really like that, you can start placing these into thumbnails. So I spoke about these earlier, but they're boxes, and I would recommend putting the gutter in so you know where it is, so you don't put anything important in there. And some of you might have already started doing this, or some of you might already have drawings from task 3 that would work well for this. So you can either draw thumbnails around the drawings you've already done, or you can redraw them into small thumbnails and think about how they'd sit within a page. A few people asked on Tuesday about the size of a book. This is the sort of stage you'd start to think about the size, and that's completely up to you. I'll show an example later on where the scale of the book has been taken into account because of the theme of the book. So I mentioned to someone on Tuesday, if you're doing a book about giraffes, it's going to be a tall, thin book because they've got long necks. If you're doing a book about a snake or a crocodile, it might be a long, thin landscape book. If you're doing a book about the moon, it might be a circular book. Think about how you might want to put your book together and what shape it wants to be, and start thinking about that at the thumbnail and rough stage, and flat plan stage, because that's when you're going to start planning the compositions. There's no point planning a book which is landscape, thin and long, and then making a final book which is tall and thin. So start thinking about that now. So here's Sean Tan. This is Sean Tan sort of, again, story planning and thinking about these designs. And then this is him sort of putting them into almost thumbnails here, sort of thinking about page size. And I think as you go on, yeah, here's some more Sean Tan work. And you can see, again, this is all story planning and thinking and figuring out. And then we've got him dropping these sorts of images into, top left, we've got him dropping these images into thumbnails. So thinking about how they'd sit as compositions on a page. So we're not going to be working with this one today, but this one is Helen Stevens' 32-page picture book layout. And I put this in because I think it's interesting to show, to visually show what I was talking about at the beginning of how they print on one piece of paper. So 32-page picture book layout was, I think it was really taken off when the Ladybird books were published. So you might have seen those, you will have seen those. They're sort of small, vintage books for kids, and Ladybird realized that they could print a whole book on one big sheet of like A0, A1 paper, and that they could then cut it up and turn it into a book. So you can see Helen's visualization down here. A picture book is cut from one single sheet of paper. So taking a massive sheet of paper, a printer can print the whole thing in one go and then cut it up and put it into a picture book. But this is from Helen Stevens' website. She's got good resources on her website, but also she works with the Good Ship Illustration, and they have good resources on their website as well. So Helen's worth checking out if you don't know Helen already. Oh, I wish I'd just put all the text in one place and then I wouldn't have to keep moving all these boxes around, but there we go. So flat plans and thumbnails. So once you've got that story idea and you've started drawing your characters, which you might have already done, and you've started putting them into thumbnails, you'll start to work on a flat plan. And we're going to work on a flat plan this afternoon and Monday. So very often the first jottings are illegible only to yourself. That's from Martin Salisbury's book, Illustrating Children's Books. But Marina Coppo, whose work is on the right-hand side here, said, my creative process is totally chaotic. The first step is insight, that moment of grace that compensates all of the work and the frustration that will come after. Then there's months and months of this, and it's flat planning and working quite roughly and quickly. You know, some of these pages you can kind of just make out maybe what's going on, like this maybe is a bridge or a path in the middle, and these are maybe trees, these lines, but some of them, this like squiggle next to it, I'm not quite sure what that is, but Mariana would know, Mariana would know what these mean. So at this stage you can work really loosely, and I think I've got, this is one of mine, so this is from my first book, Lion Practice. So you can see I'm you know, you can vaguely see it's a lion, and that's a child riding on the back of a lion, and that this is sort of a lion being pulled on a lead, and this is a child singing maybe, but and this is a lion's tail, and this is her saying that it smells. So you know, I can read them, but I don't expect anyone else to read them. And this is the kind of level that you can work at this stage. You can see here I've also sort of dropped in crosses, and we're going to be using those this afternoon. And that's kind of because I know an image is going to go there, and I know that a big image needs to go here and lots of little images need to go here to fit with the text, but I don't quite know what that image is yet. Or perhaps I do know, but I don't want to draw it out again. So we're going to use these crosses this afternoon, and I'm going to show you how to quickly put together a story into a flat plan or thumbnails. And this is what we're going to be using. So crosses are these big crosses or little crosses are a shorthand way of showing what size image might happen on each page. So if you have a look at current picture books, I've got a few in the office which I'll bring in this afternoon, but you can also visit Waterstones for really current books, or Plymouth Library in town has a great children's book section. And you can see how different page layouts are used to inform and tell a story. Big images make us slow down and look for details and pause, and smaller images can make us speed up the reading. So have a think about how you might want to use different sized images within your book. It's very rare to find a picture book that just uses one of these formats. It's not unheard of, and is usually seen in more traditional picture books. But if you have a look at contemporary picture books in Waterstones, you'll find that there's lots of different page layouts used within one book. So, for example, a double page spread like this one from Benji Davis's Grandpa's Island. And you can show that by putting a big cross through the whole page. A half page spread and then 2 vignette images. And you can see this in Axel Scheffler's Stickman. So you've got a big image on the left-hand side and then 2 little images with the text in between. We mentioned the snowman on Tuesday for wordless books, but a comic book style panel pages, you can totally do that within children's books, and it's a really good way of showing if you want to show something moving, or for example within this image it's a snowman being built and time passing. It's a really good way of doing that without taking up too many pages, and also children love this. Children love to spot all the different things happening, but images like this can be read quite quickly. It's almost like in music, when music speeds up and you get lots of rhythmic notes, similar sort of feel when you put lots of images on a page. You can tell stories within double page spreads. So this is a page from Beatrice Alemagna's book, Squishy, Itty, Bitty, Fluffy.
It's got a really weird name.
It's got a really long, weird name. It's something like that. I used to have it in the office, but I think it's in storage now, but I will double check. I might have brought it in with me. But it's one of my favorite picture books. This is the one that took her 6 years to write because it's an adventure story, which she doesn't normally write. But you can see this is a double page spread. So it's a big image of a town. So you could show it like this, a big cross. But also we know, because we've read the rest of the book, that the main character is wearing this neon pink fluffy coat. So because we know that, we can then spot the character going through the whole image. And essentially it's telling us a narrative. Beatrice could have done it similar to how the snowman is formed, with lots of images on one page. That's how it could have been shown. It could have shown the main character going through to all these different shops and knocking on all the doors looking for this item. Or the way Beatrice did do it is have this big spread and have this character moving through it. So think about different ways you can use a page layout. When you are planning a book, you need to work out how the story develops over a sequence of pages. And the easiest, if not only way to do this, is to produce a form of flat plan. I've crossed out storyboard and put flat plan because I think Ashley is going to use storyboards with you in the animation strand. And we're going to use flat plans, but this is from Martin Salisbury's book again, illustrating children's books, and this is a flat plan of Marta Altez's book Grandpa, My Grandpa. So you can see they've got the title page, end papers, cover, end papers, title page. And then this is where the book starts. And Marta's sort of roughly jotted the text underneath on some pages if it's a bit longer, or she's jotted it in. She's used colour in this, which you can do. This is probably a flat plan from a bit later on in the book. Book making process, but you can see quite clearly what's going on here, and we can read this as a story now without it being in a dummy book, but you can see some of the pages are still left blank, and she's put the lines in up here on page, what page is this? I can't read her handwriting, but the page up here, you've got the lines where that text is going to go. So yeah, there's lots of things happening here that we've already talked about today. So this is another example of a flat plan. This is one by John Shelley. And John Shelley's printed out a flat plan here. I've got one, which I'm hoping John's put up on the DLE for me, which you can print out and use, or you could draw one like Marta did. Marta's hand drawn this in their sketch in her sketchbook. I would recommend doing that. It's quite quick and easy, but if you do want to work a bit more neatly, you can print one out. And what John Shelley's also done, John Shelley sort of added these annotations around the images, but also used post-it notes to be able to move the text around. So these are just the top strips of a post-it note, the sticky bit. And that would mean that you could then move the text. So if you thought, oh, actually, I don't want the text on that page, I want it up here, you can do that. This is one from Shauna Jackany. And so they've said, and this is from a blog post that they did about dummy books, but if a thumbnail isn't working, I draw more thumbnails on an extra piece of paper, and I cut out the new thumbnail and tape it over the thumbnail that wasn't working. And sometimes I will draw many thumbnails for one scene until I get it right. Sometimes I think it feels right until I start sketching it, and then I realize I need to go back. So you can see here they've sellotaped thumbnails over the top of old thumbnails. So you can see the working process, and you can do this if you want to. Some people did it last year and found it worked really well. But it's a nice way of kind of being able to see what had come before. You can see on this, the text underneath is really heavy. It's a lot of text in this narrative. So you can see that they've already started to think where that text might go. And again, they're using these lines to block in how much text is going to fit there, and whether that's sitting within an image or whether they're leaving space under the image. So if you have written a bit more text, do make sure you leave the space for that text in your, and put it at this stage. You should be doing it, well, right from the beginning, but definitely at this stage. You can even cut out your pictures and paragraphs and swap them around. You can write notes to yourself in the margin to check that you are happy with your plan. Read through each spread in turn as if it was your finished book. So this is one from Mick Inkpen. You can, and like last year, had lots of students do one flat plan and then photocopy it at the same scale, and then cut that photocopy out and then move things around and draw new thumbnails and stick them down and color them in and put post-it notes over the top of them, write all over them. It's completely up to you how you want to work on these. There's long-winded ways, and then there's shortcuts like photocopying stuff and sticking stuff over. Again, it depends how you prefer to work. I used to just redraw everything over and over again because I preferred working more traditionally. You can work digitally doing these as well if you want to, but just make sure you keep every rendition that you do. So if you're working on an iPad making these thumbnails and flat plans, just every time you make a change to a thumbnail, just make sure you don't rub things out and then get rid of it, because then we can't see the process. So that's just really important to know. This is one of Viv Schwartz's dummy books. So Viv worked for Walker Books on this book. There are cats in this book. And Walker Books actually physically gave her a dummy book that was going to be to the scale of the book, so in ratio, and I think it was actually to scale of her book. And then it's because it's a flat book, working in a dummy book was really useful because she had to know how things physically flipped over. And again, I don't know if I've got these books in here or if they're at home, but the flaps lead the story. So every page that turns, the cat then does something for the next page. It's a very interactive book, and worth checking out. I think Viv has videos on YouTube of herself reading these books, so it's worth having a look if you're interested in doing flat books. But you can see that Viv's written all over this with pen. She's jotted down notes, she's redrawn bits. They should be quite messy dummy books. And this might be, are these yours? I don't know. These are probably to scale.
No, not my ones, no, but they were about the size that I did do the early ones.
Yeah, these are to scale of what Brittany used to make, these tiny little beautiful dummy books. But they still work, don't they, for narrative? You can still kind of.
Oh yeah, definitely. It's good earlier on when you're doing like thumbnails as well, and it's all quite still rough.
Yeah.
It feels like you're not wasting paper then.
Yes, yeah, so you can do them black and white, and you can just use your thumbnails to stick these back to back, and they can be tiny little stories, but they're so useful to see that pacing and structure of the book. You can do them color if you want. This looks like Jodie Howard, but I don't know if it is. But yeah, lovely tiny little dummy books if you want to. So this is my grandpa, so this is the dummy book of the flat plan that I showed you of Martyrs. So these are images from Martyrs website, I think, but you can see how it went from flat plan to dummy book, and this is a more finished dummy book, so this is something that Marta would have taken to a publisher to show them. So it's got color, and everything's laid out how Marta thinks it should be for a publisher to see, and it's got the text in as well. So this is more of a finished dummy book. I'm not expecting you to get to this stage of dummy book within this 3 weeks. My stomach's rumbling. I must have been talking for, yeah, we've almost been going an hour. Okay. So a dummy book, when it gets more final, it's the stage you would take it to a publisher, but I'm not expecting you to make a final dummy book for this book. This project. I'm not expecting you to do any artwork, finished artwork at all. Most people want to, that's fine. There is time to do that, but what I'm really interested in is you learning those core picture book skills, and we can talk about that. If you need to chat about that, please do come in at 11:30 and we can talk for an hour before lunch. So other things to think about when you're working in a picture book, end papers, so I've mentioned them already, but they can create a sense of entry for the story. So if your book is based in the woods, you might want to draw someone going into the woods to show them going in, before the story's even started. If it's based in like a little town, you might want to draw a map so that the reader can see where all these things are happening, or they can be purely decorative, or they can just be plain paper. You don't need to do end papers for this project, but most people love doing end papers, and I save them for the end. Do you save them to the end? Yeah, because they're the best bit. But if you do love end papers, Marta used to run this picture book end papers Instagram page. I don't know if it's still going or if it's been updated, but it's lovely to see lots of different, it's just end papers from picture books. Text, we're going to do a talk on text later in the project, and all I'm going to do in that talk is just show you lots of lovely examples of text in picture books which could inspire how you use it, but you could already start thinking about that now. So this is Sarah Finelli on the right hand side, and then there's quote from Mick Inkpen on the left. So consider the text. Where will it lie? How much space will it require? Will it run over the illustration or separate on the, or will it be separate on the page? Likewise, leave a good gap between text and the gutter. So don't put anything in the middle. That's just a reminder again, please don't put anything in the middle. This is the wrong illustrator at the bottom right hand side. This is Oliver Jeffers illustrating, and I can't remember his name. It's a graphic designer who did all the text for this book. And I went to a talk of theirs, and they said that they individually lay in InDesign all of this type so that they could start making it form imagery. So you can see it's forming the waves here. But when it was co-editioned, which we spoke about on Tuesday, so when it was translated into other languages, these fairy tales are that are used within the text, but within the image, are translated into other fairy tales which are local to wherever it was translated in. So in French, it's more French fairy tales, and in America, they've put more American folklore and fairy tales. So it's quite an interesting way of how text can build part of the image if you want it to. And you don't have to lay it out in InDesign. I won't do that within this project, but it's something to think about. Me and Brittany spoke about this in tutorials on Tuesday, but don't illustrate what's written. You must find a space in the text so that the pictures can do the work, and then you must let the words take over when the words do it best. And it's kind of like a juggling act. So you don't want to draw what's written, and you don't want to write what's drawn. So if you've got your character walking into the woods, in the visuals, don't then write your character is walking into the woods. Again, it's a balancing act, and we can go through these in tutorials, but something to start thinking about now. This is what I was mentioning earlier with the size of the book. So this is Susie Lee's book, Wave, and it's long and thin. And that's because it's about a wave coming in and out of the ocean. And so this is a quote here from David Roberts talking about the size and the shape of the book. So I start by thinking about the size and shape and whether the story would fit best in landscape, portrait, or square. And when I've established the book's physical size, I then begin drawing ideas into layout paper, plotting and composing the images around the text, and thinking about how the pagination should flow. So that's like a dummy book. But start thinking now about what size book you want, and you can make any size book you want. If you want to make a triangular book, please do, like, push the boundaries. It doesn't have to be a standard formatted book. Again, this is Susie Lee using the gutter. So we've spoken a bit about the gutter already. The middle of the book, don't put anything there, but you can use it to your advantage. So this is Susie Lee's book Shadow, where she's using the shadow, the gutter to almost show a different world, the shadow world. So yeah, don't put anything important in the gutter, but you can use the gutter to tell a story. And this book came up on Tuesday. Brittany mentioned this one, which is Tadpole's Promise, which is about a tadpole who falls in love with a caterpillar. I might have it in here in the office, so I will have a look and see if I've got it. It's a really clever book, and again, the gutter is used to show two different worlds. So you've got the caterpillar's world above, and then the tadpole's world below. Page turns. So a spread might have lots of pictures on it, or one big illustration. Think about which moments are the most important ones in your story and what space you will give to each illustration. Think too about page turns. Page turns can make a story entertaining. As the reader turns the page, what are they going to discover on the other side? Will the page turn add a twist? Will it finish a sentence in a surprising way? So you can use it for suspense or a punchline or a joke or something scary. Think about every time that page is being turned, you want to reveal something to the reader. You don't want very similar images on each page. And it could also be dictated about the way you've written it. If it's a rhyming book, for example, think about how that page turn might sit within the rhyme. This is Peter Brown talking about research, which I'm not going to play because I want to make sure that we've got some time for questions at the end, but I would encourage you to go watch this if you do want to think about research or see more of Peter Brown Peter Brown's work. I've got his book Mr. Tiger Goes Wild with me, so I will bring that into the studio, but that is worth a watch. So the aim of the Children's Market project is not the final artwork or the book itself. It's learning core picture book skills like the development of ideas and flat plans and thumbnails. So I'm not looking for final artwork. I'm looking for you to learn these skills of developing a story. We're going to be using a flat plan, and this is the one I've asked John to pop up on the DLE. I'm hoping it's there already, but if not, it will go up ASAP. But this is one that I've put together, but you can draw something like this in your sketchbook. Please don't feel free to make a flat plan however you want to. You don't have to use this one. But this is what we're going to be doing this afternoon. So I put times alongside these tasks, but I know I'm going to run over slightly, but please do come into the studio when you can after this lecture's finished, and we can go through these tasks. You can go through these tasks. Again, I'm hoping this is up on the DLE for you to access. So for this task, we'll be using multiple flat plans, and you can either use the template provided or copy this one into your sketchbook workbook. Or just sheets of paper if you want, but make sure the boxes are big enough for you to work in, and you may want to write the story underneath. It's up to you. So we've seen how Marta Altez has done that within her flat plans, but you don't have to do that. We've also seen how people have stuck it on with paper, or physically written out in type the text underneath the story, but you don't need to if you don't want to. So this is what we're going to be doing. This is the first part of task 4. And again, I've put times alongside this, but just so you know roughly how long you should spend on this. But you've got today to work on this, and this afternoon, and you've got Monday, and then you can start putting these into dummy books on Monday once you've got a more final flat plan. So please don't feel like, oh my gosh, I'm not going to get this done today. That's okay. If you're running a bit behind, that's fine. You've got the rest of today and Monday to work on this. I've just attached time so you roughly know how long to spend on it, and don't spend too long on certain areas. So what I'd like you to do, once you've drawn out or printed off this flat plan, is to use X's, fill in each thumbnail with X's to show where you think the images will go. So it could be a full page double spread. It could be vignettes, which are small images, and we spoke about those earlier with the Stickman book. It could be a small image on a page to give lots of room for text, or it could be a half page, so just half an image on one side. You should spend about 15 minutes on this. It shouldn't take too long. It's just putting crosses into boxes, thinking about your text. So if you've got Little Red Riding Hood went into the woods, you might think, okay, I'm going to put the woods on this side, and then on this side I'm going to put 2 images of my character on that side. Yeah, Joe, don't worry, it's okay if you end up working at your own pace on this. You've got all of the rest of today, and you've got Monday as well. So you've got loads of time working on this. I've just put times just so that you know roughly how long to spend on these steps, because this process should be quite quick. So I don't want you spending like an hour on this X's page. It should take about 15 minutes. But ignore the times at the top. You've got time. You've got today and Monday, so don't worry. So some of you will have got further ahead already. So I know some of you have already started planning stuff out in thumbnails and flat plans already, but please do go back and do this task and use X's to drop in images, because it's a really important way of working for speed. Doing an X in a box is quicker than drawing out a whole final drawing of artwork for an editor to then say, actually, I don't want a double page spread there. I want to have lots of vignettes there, or we're going to change the whole text. So it's not going to work. So working like this is a speedy way of working, and it's a good skill to learn. So after you've done the crosses in the boxes, you'll move on to part 2. And again, you want to spend 15-20 minutes on this. And using a new flat plan, fill in the pages with shapes. So get yourself a new flat plan, draw out a new one, and just fill in, draw quickly where things might fit. So a house could be represented by a square with a triangle on top, and a figure could be a blob, and you can work your way through the whole flat plan, placing shapes on the pages. And these shapes represent what illustrations you might put there. So again, it doesn't have to be final, but just remember that they should link up to where you've put the crosses before. So if you've put a cross, if you've put 2 half-page illustrations as crosses, make sure you then draw those illustrations as 2 half pages. And yeah, about 15-20 minutes. Again, ignore the times at the top, because you've got time this afternoon, you've got time on Monday. But again, about 15-20 minutes on this, just really quickly putting images down. And then with a different coloured pen, so this is the next part, and you want to spend about half hour on this, maybe 15-20 minutes if you're quick, but read through what you've done alongside the text that you've got and think about how things are looking. And with a different coloured pen or pencil, start moving things around. You can have much more control over what's on each page at this stage. So you've done the first 2 quite quickly and you've put those images down, but this is a chance to kind of reflect on what you've done. So you might think, actually, I don't need 2 big explosions on this page. I can just do it in 1 big explosion. And I might actually want to put an axe in Red Riding Hood's hand. So I'll add that in and make sure it's in the background of when they're having tea together with Grandma. And actually, I don't need lots of illustrations to show that they're having tea with Grandma. I'm going to do it as 2 drawings of the characters sat opposite each other. Or, oh, I think actually this spread would be better if it was the wolf going into the woods. So I'm going to make it a full spread, and I'm going to draw the wolf coming into this woods section. So have a think. Do you need to change where double page spreads are? Do you need to change where the paneling is? And you want to draw directly onto flat plan 2, and still keep this rough and loose. And you must make a minimum of 3 edits. There'll be so much you'll want to change in this, and that you should want to change. Like, this bit should be fun and exciting. You can do anything. You can put anything in these images. In previous years, when I've run this, you know, people have tried to make just 1 change, a tiny little change, but this is where you get to really play around and become a set designer and change things for the backgrounds and add in different characters and think about what props your characters might need, like an axe, and think about what sound effects you might want to add. So make at least 3 changes. You might make more, but 3 changes minimum. It won't be that hard. There'll be stuff you want to move around and change. And then you want to work on one that's a bit quick but more legible. So this should be more finished than the others, but still done quickly. And you want to spend about 20 minutes, half an hour on this. If you want to, you can rewrite. You might find that by doing this, you want to rewrite parts of the text and move things around as much as you like. You might find that you want to flip. Last year, we had someone who flipped the whole story by doing this. They thought, actually, the ending is a better beginning and the beginning is a better ending. So they flipped their whole narrative around. So you might find that you end up doing that. But make sure you take into consideration the coloured pencil edits you made, and apply them to this final flat plan. And it should be legible enough that you could show it to a stranger and they'd know what's going on. So it doesn't have to be finished artwork, completely finalized, but you might want to add color at this stage. You might want to add some text if you want to, but it should be clear enough that you could show it to us, and we'd know what was going on in a tutorial. And then you just keep repeating these stages, and you can do that an unlimited amount of time. And that's why you're going to have the rest of today to work on this, and Monday, and possibly time next week. This is the last task I'm going to set within this project. So these sorts of changes and edits and working in a dummy book and thinking about your story are sort of the next couple of weeks is what you're going to be working on. So although I've told you to do this this afternoon and in the next couple of days, getting it done and getting all of these parts of this task, like drawing out the flat plan, putting the crosses in, adding the blobs, reworking them, learning to do that fast is the most important thing. And that's why I've kind of set some times alongside them. But if you can get them done today and Monday, it gives you a really good chance to then make further edits to your story and make a better, stronger story, and give you time towards the end of the project where you might want to make some final artwork, but I'm not expecting you to at all. So in the example, I don't need to read that because that's just what I've done on that previous flat plan. There are now options now. So yeah, like I've mentioned already within this talk, some illustrators will photocopy their flat plans to make it easier to edit, and some cut theirs up and they can move it around. And in that video, Peter Brown uses a whole wall to move his spreads around. So you might want to stick them up in front of you on the wall, and then physically move things around. If you've got a board in front of you, you could do the same. I like to draw really rough flat plans over and over again until I have this right sequence. And sometimes it's just part of the sequence that needs working on and the rest of the books is fine. So sometimes if it's just the beginning I need to work on, I'll just draw 4 thumbnails out to work out the beginning over and over and over again. And then I'll put that back into my final flat plan. But doing this is like an annoying puzzle, where things don't seem to fit together and you have to keep working at it. But by keeping these flat plans and thumbnails really loose, it allows you to make changes quickly. I know I mentioned that at the beginning, and efficiently without getting too attached to an image or spending too long working on one drawing. I don't know if you've had this, Brittany, but I've definitely had my favourite images scrapped from a picture book. I don't know if you've had it.
I have had things tweaked and edited before, even though it might have been something I really liked. But usually, I mean, the publisher has the final say, really, so I have to change it.
Yeah, so we've both had stuff we love in a picture book scrapped, and it's easier to scrap something at this stage where you're working quite quickly. It's a lot harder when you've actually finished the artwork and they want to make the changes, which is why I'm getting you to learn these skills now. And those are skills, like we mentioned right at the beginning, these are skills you can apply to any area of illustration. But the most important thing about flat planning, I mean, I've written is to make sure that things change and develop, but also just make sure you have fun with it. There's no right or wrong way of doing this. Cutting things out might work better for you, photocopying, drawing them out, having them stuck on your wall, having them stuck in a sketchbook, making a little dummy book straight away. These might all be ways that you would prefer to work, but it should be fun. I'm definitely coming to the end now, do not worry. There's just a bit of theory for those who are thinking of writing essays later on about children's markets. 99 ways to tell a story, understanding comics, how picture books work, and illustrating picture books. These are all good theory books to have a look at. And then there's some useful links for you, again, for those interested in knowing more about children's markets. Do go check out that Peter Brown video, it's really good. And then Marta Altes has a picture book process blog post on the Picture Book Makers website. Oliver Jeffers has a YouTube video, which is a quick look into his practice, and Very Little Peach did a how to make a picture book YouTube video, which is a good watch as well. Right, I've just spoken for far too long again. I know I said come in at past, but what I'm going to do is give you still half an hour to come in. So if you can come in, in half an hour, which would take us up to 10 to 12. If you want, I mean, we're in anyway, so if you're closer and you want to come in straight away, please do come in and chat about your stories that you might want help with, or characters that you might want to help with. but come in before lunch and start working on this task. Like, it's really quick, and you'll get more done. You'll get a lot done quickly today, quicker than you think. But please do come in and work in the studio, and please do come in and chat to us. If you think you're going to be in after lunch, then please do send me a message, but I don't have an email address anymore, and you don't either. That's a problem. Please do let us know somehow. Carrier pigeon, but please do come work in the studio. We're going to be there so we can answer any questions, but give us, I'm not going to expect you in straight away. I know some of you have got a little walk in to get here. Does anyone have any questions before we finish the Zoom call? Emily's shaking her head. I will wait a little bit in case people are typing anything. Yeah, Freya's heading in. Great, brilliant. See you in a minute, Freya. No questions. Okay, what me and Brittany will do, we'll just grab a cup of tea. Joe's happy, that's good. Me and Brittany are going to grab a cup of tea, grab a coffee. We're going to head to the studio. We're going to bring books and dummy books into the studio so you can have a look, and then we'll be there to help with story questions and character questions and any questions you might have up until lunchtime. And then after lunch, we're going to we'll take you off in small groups and show you our dummy books and just show you that next step of taking those flat plans that you're going to make over the next couple of days and make them into dummy books. So that is the plan for the rest of the day. Like I said, there's time to work on this, so please don't worry. Please don't feel like you have to get it finished today. And if you're still working on a story, that's okay. But this is the last task I'm going to set you within this 3 weeks. So you're going to have the rest of the time to work on these. But I do want to see more development of your story as you go through. So the quicker you do this bit, the quicker you get to do your developing and play around with your story as much as you want. But thank you very much, everyone, and I will see you in the studio in about half hour, and we'll be here to answer any questions, or come in sooner, whenever. But see you soon. Bye, everyone.
See you soon.
Bye.